Okay, so very soon you're going to be getting one of our lap leopard Bengal kittens, and I have so much to tell you. I'm here to introduce you to a lifelong love affair. But to get started, let's talk about some of the products we use and recommend and the why. And hopefully this will help you understand how to increase the longevity of your Bengal cat. Because Bengals are very much like regular cats, but they do differ in a couple of ways. So the first thing I want to talk about is the litter. So we start litter training at 4 weeks. That's also when we start the food process. We introduce them to the food, and by 6 weeks, they should be fully weaned. Now, we start off with Kitten Attract because it's got something in it, can't put my finger on, but whatever it is, it causes them to go buku wacky crazy for. I mean, they love it, they play in it, it's like a big sandbox. So it's really great at introducing them to the litter. But once they start using it consistently, we end up switching over to this. And this is what I use for all of them. I love this product because it is corn, which means it is septic safe. You can flush it down the toilet, although we don't. But the thing I love about corn is it's got low dust, and you can eat it, and it's safe, and it clumps really well and absorbs the odors. A lot of products on the market currently right now are clay, and that's this unfortunately. Now the thing with clay is it doesn't absorb anything, and because of that, they tend to put a lot of carbon into it, a lot of other products to make it smell better, but in the end it creates a lot of dust. And dust is not a good thing for the respiratory system, especially since the respiratory system in cats are actually particularly challenged. So very good product. I use the multi-cat. I also add in this Digestive Earth, Digestive Earth. And this is a product that you can get at any local feed store. We use Tractor Supply. And the reason why you want to, there's like a whole little sheet in your packet that you're gonna get talking about it, is because this helps to absorb more odor as well, but on top of it, it has shape to the small particles that actually kill pathogens. So whether you're talking viral pathogens, parasitic, bacterial, this actually does a really good job killing it. So that's obviously good news for us. I have noticed a good difference when adding this into the litter. There is definitely a quicker resolution of any issues at all. So here is the water fountain. I absolutely 100% say you need a water fountain. I'll go over that in a little bit. This is the water fountain I like to use because they love how it just goes down and splatters here, and this is low enough so that kittens can drink from it. Now this is supposed to help keep dust and everything out, but I actually don't use it because they love to drink from the top as well. So anything that encourages them to use the water fountain, that's what I'm gonna do. Now I will say that this does require upkeep. About once a week, it has to be scrubbed down. And I mean like in the little nooks and crannies and all the little surfaces, even down that little hole. We use a toothbrush to get down in there. It's unbelievably difficult to get it super clean, but it is so worth it. And the same thing with the water fountain engine here. You have to take it apart. You got to clean all the parts out. Otherwise, it can actually get junk inside it and just stays in there and it gets into the water. So speaking of how awesome the dry food is, come on. So let's talk about the wet food. Now, wet food should be grain-free. And we'll talk a little bit more as far as why. But grain-free is the way to go. Now, a lot of the products you're gonna find, wet food, dry food, it's gonna have chicken in it. Chicken is the filler protein ingredient. And just to make it even more cheaper, they also will put peas into it to up the protein percentage, although it's not actually meat protein, it's plant protein. But you're gonna see that a lot in the ingredients. So get used to looking at the ingredients and checking out the fat content, the protein content, and the kilocalorie content, because it really speaks volumes about fillers. The more fillers in a product, the lower the calories are. And chicken is one of the most used fillers there is. And so along those lines, if you get anything that doesn't have chicken in it, the cats go crazy over it because they're so used to chicken. I mean, even like you got this turkey here, it's got chicken in it. So they might like it, but it's got chicken in it. And then you got the beef and it has chicken in it. And then you have this one, and it's got chicken in it. So chicken's in everything. Now I have found a bunch of stuff with no chicken in it. And guess what they love? The stuff with no chicken. So this is not limited ingredient diet. I'll talk about that in a second. This is basically just food that has no chicken in the ingredients. So you definitely want to find those and use them as well, because not only will they like them more, but it will help to lower the possibility of later acquiring a chicken allergy. Then you have what's called limited ingredient diets. These are especially true for cats that do get a chicken allergy. Sometimes they're born with it, sometimes they acquire it later in life. So there's a lot of limited ingredient options. You do not need to buy the expensive stuff your vet is pushing on you. This stuff works just fine, although I have to say Natural Balance is not their preferred brand. I've used a few other brands that are LID, limited ingredient diets, and they preferred them better. So as far as wet food goes, this is a wet food that we're trying out now. Now, I don't like the fact that it has grain, and I don't like the fact that it has byproducts in it, but it is something that they do enjoy. So I start them off weaning them on this, and then I switch them to the good stuff. As far as the dry food goes, again, I mix the wet food and the dry food, and all those same things are true for the dry food. It does have grain in it, which is not great. It does have byproduct, which is not great. But one of the things I really love about this is the size of the actual pieces. So you take a look at, this is Instinct Original. You look at the pieces. Now, little itty bitty baby kitten teeth cannot really crunch down on that as good or as well as this. Plus, you could put this in wet food and it does really well. It doesn't dry out the wet food too much. You put this in the wet food and you can easily dry out the wet food if you put too much into it. So in the beginning, we like to put dry food and wet food and mix it together until they get older. And then you can separate the wet food and the dry food. The dry food has a great purpose. It scrapes the teeth, it helps with tartar control. And the wet food has a great purpose. It helps with hydration. But little itty bitty baby bellies cannot handle too much water because then they get diarrhea. So the dry food actually helps them consume more calories. The dry food actually has 4 times more calories than the wet food. So we've noticed kittens that eat dry food quicker gain weight quicker than the kittens that just eat the wet food and don't want to eat the dry food. So knowing that, putting them together, wet food and dry food, and you got a magic combo where they're gaining the weight you need them to gain and they're not becoming too dehydrated. But yes, when they get older, separating them is a good idea just because the dry food does have that function of cleaning the teeth. So that being said, you definitely do want to use a gravity-fed bowl for your dry food. The dry food should be out all the time so that they can eat it on demand. The wet food you put out 2-3 times a day. They like freshness. So when it goes stale, they stop eating. So by doing 2 or 3 times a day, you're encouraging them to eat more and gain more weight. If they do start to do this thing where they're digging out all the dry food, that's because they notice it goes stale the longer it sits out there. So to help with that, we've also bought a machine that puts out a certain amount so many times in a day. So we do 6 times in a day, a little bit out, and it keeps it fresh. And we notice that they do better that way. Those cats that are picky about their freshness. Let's talk about health. So your cat is going to grow up and you're going to face a few problems. From birth to 6 months, their immune system is very challenged. They're creating a biome in their gut of healthy gut flora, healthy gut bacteria that's going to help fight off viruses and parasites down the road. But they haven't developed it yet. They're still working on it. It's a work in progress. And because of that, irritable bowel and diarrhea and any kind of digestive upset is much more easily seen in a younger kitten that's still developing that healthy gut biome that they need. And since 80% of the immune system's in the gut, that also means that a challenged gut means a challenged immune system. So your immune system is not going to work as great as an adult. So that being said, we have to watch out for a few certain things. The number one thing being diarrhea. So diarrhea is caused by a few different things. And this is just naming a few. Stress. I would say stress is probably the biggest reason. An example, your kitten transporting from our house to your home is going to cause a certain amount of stress. So it's very common for kittens to have 2 or 3 days of diarrhea that should clear up on its own. And if it does, it's because it's stress induced. Another reason, diet. So there's a few things in that category. A change in diet. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stick to the same brand, but it does mean you can't go from a loaf, a pate, to something that's super liquidy, like, for example, Rachel Ray's, and not have diarrhea. Now, I find that the food that's really liquidy, like Rachel Ray's, and this here, which is actually like a gravy type of thing, and anything that's really liquidy. The other things that are liquidy is these signature selects. They're super liquidy. You need to add dry food. You got to dry it out a little bit. Too much liquid equals diarrhea. And I've had a few people who asked about that, and I said, well, add some dry food to the wet food, and it solved the problem. So again, and gravy and sauce can in fact cause problems. Too much wet food, again, diarrhea. Not enough dry food, diarrhea. Now you could go the other way too. If you have too much dry food and not enough wet food, then you can end up with constipation. So there's definitely that balance that, you know, putting some of the dry food and the wet food together and not having too much of either one. As they get older, their digestive system will mature and they'll be able to handle all kinds of different foods and it won't be a problem. But up till 6 months, it still can be a problem. So the other issue is pathogens. Now, I say pathogens because there's 3 major types of pathogens. There's viral, there's parasitic, and then there's bacterial. So any 3 of those can cause diarrhea. Now the solution would be a monthly dewormer. We used to do a oral dewormer that we put into our go home packets, but now it's topical. You can put it on the back between the shoulder blades where they can't lick it, and you can do it once a month. There's 2 major kinds. There's Profender, which just does 3 major worms. And then there's Advocate, which does 2 of these, but not the 3rd. And it does other things like lungworm, which this doesn't do. It does ear mites, mange, fleas, ticks, all kinds of stuff, heartworm. So it's a pretty good product. And you should definitely do that once a month. Also, I mentioned mixing diatomaceous earth into the litter will kill pathogens. Really good thing to do. And then lastly, probiotics. So again, one of the biggest keys to helping that gut flora is to put in all the good bacteria in there. The good bacteria will fight off the bad bacteria, but it's also known to fight off other things too, like viruses. I like to say clay is really good at fixing any kind of digestive upset. And the biggest reason why this product works so well is because when you look at wild animals, like in Africa and India and anywhere else in the world, and they have any kind of digestive upset, what they tend to do is go to the banks of the river and they eat the clay. And what the clay does is it cleanses the whole system. It pulls out toxins and pathogens and anything, and it calms the system down. So, and the thing I like about this clay is it has a product in it called kaolin, which is in and of itself, you find an anti-diarrhea medication. So they're taking a good product that's normally an anti-diarrhea medication, they're adding it to the clay, which also works really well, and you got a great product. So this is best done 3-4 times a day. If there's any digestive upset, it'll fix it quick and in a hurry. Also pumpkin. Pumpkin can do the same thing, similarly. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is allergies, as far as diarrhea. An allergy, a food allergy, can cause diarrhea, bloating, and also loss of hair around the face or the back end. So those are big blaring signs of an allergy. If you suspect an allergy, try a food that doesn't have chicken. Chicken, I have to say, is probably 90% of the time the culprit. So any food that has no chicken, try it out for a few weeks, and if you notice all these symptoms going away, then you might be dealing with an allergy. Respiratory. So obviously, respiratory is a big thing for cats because it is part of the weakest part of their system. If you take a look at all the vaccines that we use, they're all for respiratory viruses, all of them, which is why a vaccine that you give in the nose for a respiratory virus is actually better than a vaccine that you shoot in your arm. So, but going back to respiratory, a lot of times it's a secondary infection. Most of the time cats just don't come out with a respiratory infection. A lot of times it gets added on because of a compromised immune system. So that's one big reason, a compromised immune system, which could be because of a drop in weight, because of having diarrhea, which can result in drop in weight, because of another infection, and then it just sort of tags along and becomes a respiratory infection. Now, a big reason for respiratory issues is temperature. So what most people don't realize about Bengals are actually hypoallergenic. And the biggest reason they're hypoallergenic is because they don't have 2 layers of hair. All the other cats you see are going to have an undercoat and an overcoat. The overcoat they lose in the summer, they grow in the winter. This helps keep them warm. Bengals don't have that. They have not even normal cat hair. They have what's called a pelt, a short, tight, velvety, silky soft pelt, but it doesn't do a great job keeping them warm, and it's not supposed to. Their ancestor, which is the Asian leopard cat, actually lives in a tropical, hot, humid rainforest. Think about that for a second. You're taking a cat that was bred with an Asian leopard that is used to living in a hot, humid, tropical rainforest, and then you're putting it in our homes. And what that means is that for them, they need to be warmer. They can't deal with the cold. Any amount of cold for them will end up turning into stress and then into a drop in immunity, which will result in sickness. And oftentimes I have seen that play out for many people. Like just to give you an idea of the temperatures we're talking about here, from birth to 4 weeks, we keep the room at 85 degrees. We actually have a sensor that monitors the temperature. It has to be that exact. Temperatures that drop below 85 can result in loss of kittens. So 85 is super important. From 4 weeks to 8 weeks, we only drop it from 85 to 75. We even keep it as high as 77, just for them. We've noticed that kittens they're struggling if they're not gaining weight, and we raise the temperature just a degree or 2, it's exactly what they needed. And now they're doing great. So temperature has been shown to be such a huge impact. From 2 months to 6 months, so with you guys, your temperature needs to be 73 to 75 degrees. I know that sounds crazy, but it's easily managed and you don't even notice it after a period of time when you get used to it. And one of the biggest things that can help out is a warm mist humidifier in the room. Because remember, hot, humid, tropical. So a warm mist humidifier works great for these guys. Helps to clear up any respiratory issues And then 6 months and above, it can drop to 70 to 72. But we've noticed Bengals that have struggled in homes where the temperature was as low as 68. So we think that 70 to 72 is pretty much the minimum that you want to see for one of these guys. So here we have it, diarrhea and respiratory. The two major issues that you're going to deal with from birth to 6 months, which is one of the biggest reasons why having a pet insurance program would actually work for you really well. And I'll go over that in a moment. So, and just to go over really quickly, okay, so does that mean that after 6 months you're set? Well, not entirely. When your Bengal starts to get older, 10 plus years, well, now you're dealing with two major issues that cats have. And this is not unique to Bengals. This is actually common to all cats. So, kidney disease, big problem. Every time I turn around, I have somebody tell me that their older cat, 13, 14, 15 years old, passed away because of kidney disease. It happens all too frequent. Well, why is that such a problem? Is kidneys an organ that seems to fail in cats? Well, not really. It comes down to the idea that we took a wild animal out of the wild and put it in our home and expected it to be the same, and it's not. So there's instincts that have been honed and inside these cats that are not going to go away. And one of those big instincts is the fact that they have a low thirst drive. And the reason they have a low thirst drive is because when you think about it, in the wild, when they hunt down their kill and they eat it, think about all the fluid they get. All the blood and all that. They get a lot of fluid from their kill. Probably, I would say, as much as 90% of their needed liquid is from their kill. So that means 10% comes from an external source like, well, a river. So now we're putting them in a situation where they're not having that diet anymore. They're having a canned food diet and a dry food diet. So we just wiped away like 90% of their hydration. That's a big problem. And that's one of the biggest reasons why kidney disease is an issue. Chronic dehydration. Well, how are you going to fix that? There's a couple of ways you can help out. One of them is water fountains. When you think about it, in the wild, running water is healthy. It has vitamins, minerals. You know, it keeps the sludge and the ick and the ook out of it. But then when you talk about stagnant water, think about like a pond that just sits there. Think about all the stuff that has time to grow in that pond. You know, so in their mind, pond equals filth. It equals harmful pathogens. So they actually have a biological aversion to stagnant water. So as soon as you put a bowl of water out there for them and you think that you're doing your job, they don't want to drink it. And they have a low thirst drive already. So, but then you put out a water fountain, well, now you piqued your interest. Research has shown that cats are more likely to drink from a water fountain than stagnant water. It makes sense when you think about it. So then you have to talk about increasing water stations. So think about your house. How big is it? Is there 2 floors? You know, if they're playing all over the place, you should definitely increase your water stations, especially if you have 2 floors. I have about 5 water stations all over my house, including in my bedroom and my kids' rooms and my hallway and on my first floor and everywhere. I mean, the more water stations there are, the better off it is, because out of sight does equal out of mind. You want to make it super convenient for them. You don't want them to have to hunt out for the water. You want them to be playing nearby the water source and go, oh look, there's water. I think I'll take a drink. And that will help to increase their hydration. And lastly, wet food. Wet food every day. Wet food, so important. Yes, wet food can cause diarrhea, too much of it, but you need it because you gotta have that hydration. Too much dry food, it definitely will cause those problems. So again, this comes down to nature versus nurture. Nature is, this is how they are. They have a low thirst drive, but we're bringing them into our home and we're expecting them to change overnight, and it's not going to happen. So the second biggest issue is digestive cancer. Digestive cancer is caused because of an incorrect diet, which we talked about. The whole idea that these guys are designed to be obligate carnivores. Now, even dogs are not obligate carnivores. Dogs are omnivores. They can eat fruit and vegetables and meat, but not cats. Cats were not designed to eat anything but meat. That's where they're supposed to get their protein. And because of that, we have noticed a lot of things. Like, for example, grain is what's used in a lot of food to be a filler ingredient. They were not designed to break down grain. So grains have been linked to digestive cancer. Stomach cancer, intestinal cancer, everything related to the digestive tract, it's been linked to that. Now, a lot of vets might say, well, we've noticed that grain-free diets can cause an increase in HCM. That's not entirely true. What it is legumes. So that's what the research is pointing to. A lot of grain-free diets instead use peas as their filler ingredient because they don't have grain as their filler ingredient. They go to peas. And peas is, again, a vegetable. It's a plant protein that they're not really designed to break down and use. It's meat that they need. So products that have peas and whatnot in it, legumes, have actually been linked to HCM. So that's a perfect example of how we have tried to change the diet, and this is what it has done. It has caused these problems. So I know a lot of people who are now going to the raw diet because the raw diet is closer to, well, what they're supposed to be eating. And one of the biggest changes that have occurred too is that anytime that you have a meat in a canned food, it's been cooked down. And what that does is it takes that taurine that's normally in the meat and it makes it inactive. In the wild, raw meat has a lot of taurine. And taurine is so important for the development of cats. So important that now we have to add it back into the diet just to make sure that they're getting exactly what they're supposed to be getting. So for our pregnant queens, we have to ensure that they got tons of taurine because otherwise you're not going to see good results with the litters at all. This is such an important ingredient. So here we are, we went over the major issues that affect cats and how we can deal with them. I also do use New Vet. New Vet, I add it to the wet food, and what New Vet does is it helps boost the immune system. So I would say for the first year, this is super important because you definitely want to boost that immune system. Speaking of taurine, one of the things that we actually do is tuna. And I mean straight from the store, tuna. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, you can't use tuna because you have, what's that called, John?
Mercury.
Mercury. You have too much mercury in it. Well, if it's too much mercury for them, it's too much mercury for us. So I find that they never get sick and tired of tuna, and it's got a lot of water in it. Lots of water, which is great for the hydration. So it works out really, really well. Let's talk about your paperwork. Guys, you're in my seat. Bangles everywhere. So, let's talk about pet insurance. Just to be able to offer pet insurance, I had to jump through a lot of hoops, which means showing medical and vet paperwork that all my cats are heavily vetted, heavily checked, and all of them are healthy, and all my litters in the past have all been healthy. I had to show a good track record. Otherwise, I would be a bad investment. So, after doing all that, Trupanion has finally partnered with me, and they offer all my kittens free 30 days of pet insurance. Why this is such a big deal is because most pet insurance companies will not insure right off the bat. They're gonna wait a certain period of time before you can get with them. And the biggest reason for that is because, like I mentioned before, that first month that you have your Bengals, they're gonna have the most stress. So the most opportunity to have problems. Now, I like to educate my buyers and let them know how they can prevent a lot of these issues. And so because of that, I have a great track record, and now I can offer this. Trupanin, you do not need to continue after the first month, although I hope you do, because as I mentioned, there are quite a few problems that you're gonna have to try and prevent. But should you not be able to, they'll stand by you. What does Trupanin cover? Everything except for what is the normal routine care. So if you're coming in for a wellness check, they won't cover it. If you're getting a spay and neuter, well, that's considered normal and routine, they won't cover it. If you're getting vaccines, they won't cover it. But basically everything else, any other problems like diarrhea, like I mentioned, or respiratory or kidney disease down the road, they'll cover it. So just to list off a few things: diagnostic tests, medications, surgeries, again, emergency surgeries, not spay and neuter, hospital stays, prescription food, for example, if you have a cat allergic to a certain food, prosthetic devices, carts, well, that's for like a cat's a handicap, supplements, and herbal therapies. That's pretty crazy, they cover supplements. But yeah, they do. So this is all going to be in your packet for you to look at. And you'll have the day before, the day of, and the day after you get your kitten to activate this. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for that period of time to elapse. I think it's like a month where they'll start doing, they'll start covering you. You're gonna get a bag of toys. You're gonna get a sample of my wellness wet food. You're gonna get a bag of dry food. I think this is important too. You're gonna get one of these Dr. Elsley's litter box solutions. Now, 90% of the time, your cats are never gonna have a litter box problem. But if they ever do, there's tons of solutions out there. And Dr. Elsley's Kitten Attract Litter is there for you. It does a great job. It's used in shelters all the time. You're taking cats off the street, never used a litter box in a day in its life, and now all of a sudden it's using a litter box, thanks to Dr. Elsley's. So it's great stuff. I also recommend a Ziggy Doo cat wheel. I really do. Bengals are energetic, okay? They'll sleep just like a regular cat, but when they're awake, they're awake. They're into everything. Your house can be as small or as big as you want, as long as you have a Ziggy Doo, because then they can run their hearts out. Now let's talk about NuVet. The thing I love about NuVet is the research. As a molecular biologist and talking very extensively about biology and how important it really is, I'm all about the research. And the thing I love the most is this chart right here, talking about how cats that are on NuVet have a stronger immune response when given a vaccination than cats that don't have NuVet. That says it all for me. That's what I'm looking for. It says it's an immunity booster. We'll prove it. A stronger immune response, higher antibodies. That's what I'm looking for, and that's why I love this stuff. So this is great, especially as I said, that the first 6 months, so treacherous when it comes to building that healthy gut flora and that strong immune system. You're gonna get a sample in the mail. In your packet. So you have 15% off if you do auto ship. So honestly, that way you'll never forget. Revival. I use Revival online for a lot of my products. They have a learning center on Revival, which I love. They have a blog on there. They got YouTube, they got videos, how to do this, how to do that, how to fix this problem. I go to them a lot. They also have a vet on staff that you can talk to. But I'm gonna give you a magazine. You definitely wanna look at it. So many products in this thing that I use. I cannot speak enough about it. Feline health record. So your kitten's gonna come with the very first vaccine already given. And then you're gonna get an intranasal vaccine that goes into the nose, because that gives the better immunity there. And I'm gonna send that home with you. It will need to be refrigerated, so bring a cooler with you. But when you're done vaccinating, you're gonna peel the stickers off and you're gonna put it in the chart. So this is gonna be your record of vaccination. It will also have a record of weights, and it'll have a record of dewormings. So we do the topical deworming. Orally, we do Panazerol, which takes care of coccidia. We also have something special for Giardia as well. So we like to cover the whole spectrum there. In addition to all that, your paperwork's going to include your contract, paper copy of your contract. It's going to include how to do the intranasal vaccine along with the dates. There'll also be dates on the actual package. But here it is in written form. You can give this to your vet. If your vet's like, what the heck are you giving? There's also a video on how to administer it. It's going to be in the email that I send. You're going to get a TICA registration slip. There's going to be 2 numbers that you need. You go online and you register your cat. It's a good idea to do because a lot of states actually outlaw Bengals unless they're more than 5 generations removed from the ALC breeding and they're registered. Because simply put, if they're not registered, how do you know that they're more than 5 generations? So that's why registration is so important. You're also going to get an official vet health certificate. So before your kitten comes home, they're going to be seen by our vet and certified healthy before leaving. And that's super important because once they get into your home, they're going to be introduced to new stress. And so they're going to need to undergo a challenge. And you're going to have to make sure that they deal well with the transition, that the home is warm for them and that they have everything set up the way that it needs to be. That's also the reason why we require that your vet see your kitten within 3 days, so that way your vet has a baseline of what the kitten looks like healthy, as well as establishing your kitten as a pet, as a current pet in that veterinary practice. You do not want to be in a situation where down the road you need to be fit in an emergency, but they're like, but wait a minute, we've never seen you before. We don't have an established relationship. And at that point, they might not get you in as soon as they could if you were already an established patient. So thank you for listening to my spiel, and come back anytime to listen to this again. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to me.